Welcome to this episode of Blended, Blessed, and Always a Mess. I'm Eric.
And I'm Angie.
We are married with a ton of kids.
We have 6 kids total. He has 3 and I have 3.
My name's Hallie and I love riding horses.
I'm Lexi and I love agriculture.
My name's Carter and I love eating.
My name's Chase and I love lifting weights.
My name's Summer and I love spending my parents' money.
I'm Dane and I love baseball.
Our show is about our blended, blessed, and always a mess life. And our hope is if you find yourself in the same situation we are in, that by sharing our story, all the fun and all the mess, the challenges we are experiencing, it will give you some inspirations, laughs, and community, knowing you are not alone in this mess.
We appreciate you spending time with us. Let's dive in.
This episode of Blended, Blessed, and Always a Mess is sponsored by the children's book Feathers Matter. As our kids grow up, they face challenges in their life, and knowing their self-worth and their value is crucial to face the headwinds. Purchase this beautiful story to read to your kids and grandkids and start the conversation with them at a young age. They are worthy, they matter, and their feathers matter. You can find the link to order on our blendedblessedalwaysamess.com page. Mention code #blessed for an autographed copy. Welcome to this week's episode of Blended, Blessed, and Always a Mess. Angie and I actually just got home from dinner, and I'm ready for a nice long winter's nap in the middle of summertime, if I could. That's what happens when I eat. You know this about me. I eat,
I know.
I'm ready to lay down.
Eric will be like, gosh, I'm so tired. Like, did you just eat?
It's true.
Then yes.
It started when I was around
right after
40.
you eat something. It's sleepy time.
It's time for a nap. So anyway, it was a nice dinner, date night in our household, which doesn't happen very often. And I mean, here we are. This is most date nights, dinner and a podcast.
Yeah, that's usually our date night, isn't it?
I mean, it is.
It's nice to eat something other than chicken and rice or something like that I normally have.
We had a great meal. It was a tapas place. So if you don't know what tapas is, like the little small shared plates, one of the ones we got though was like a ground pork and rice, which is kind of laughed because that is what we eat a lot. Is I told my trainer today, it's been a lot of chicken and rice, steak and rice, meatballs and rice. A lot of what we're eating in this house. Angie and I, at least.
When you have to be gluten-free, then there's not a ton of options that are quick and easy and healthy for you. So I tend to do some sort of protein with some rice. The kids are now at the point where they're making fun of me of like, oh, are you having rice tonight? But then I'll make them a little bowl mixed up with some things. And then they're like, oh yeah, that's not too bad. No kidding. It's actually pretty good.
Moms and dads know more than we get credit for. It's just, except you really don't get credit for those things, I don't think, until our kids have kids of their own. And then they're like, oh, you were right a long time ago. No duh, children. Remember when people say duh and like no duh? Those words are so gone now.
Oh my God.
Duh. No duh.
It's cap.
No cap. Yeah. No cap. Well, Ange, as we've discussed some this week, grief it's an evil one. It just takes no prisoners. And so what's been happening in your world as far as that goes?
I really do try to think of different podcast topics that doesn't feel like it's the same topic every time. But damn, when I think about what's top of mind, I feel like it always comes back to this journey that we're on. So apologies to the listeners if you feel like, oh God, here she goes again. She's going to talk about grief.
Here's what I do know. You shared a TikTok today about what we're going to talk about today. And already in like 5-6 hours, you have like almost 55,000 people that have viewed your TikTok. So that's way more people that are going to listen to this podcast. So clearly you're on to something. You're not wrong about it.
Well, I told you that I had a good afternoon. Like I felt like I had a good afternoon and you were like, well, why? And
tell me more. How can we replicate those? That's what I wanted to learn from that.
Yeah. And for me, and everybody's different, but for me, I had time to think. Like that is what helps me out whenever I have a bazillion things going on, which we all do all the time. But if I don't get time to think, process, to be, to create, to think about things, then it just feels like the snowball effect of like compounding grief. So I had a few hours to just think. And one of the things that I was thinking about, because it, I cried a lot this week. It's no different than any other week. Is like, what have I really learned from this? Like, what is God trying to teach me? And what am I supposed to do with this? I'm gonna go off topic for a minute, but
Fine by me. I don't like scripts.
I have not had a dream with Hallie in it and for a while. And so I've had some great dreams with her where I've given her a big hug and I felt her, but it hasn't happened in a while. And so I asked her the other night, like, Hallie, could you just like show up in my dreams? Like, I want to see you and I want to hug you. So I go to sleep that night and the next morning I'm like, oh my gosh, I had a terrible dream. And Eric was like, well, I got up to go to the bathroom at one point. Like, you were breathing so heavy. I was like, what is going on with her?
She had never breathed like that in her sleep. Like, I thought she was running a race.
But I mean, I don't even want to share the dream, but I will. But I dreamt I was driving down a gravel road and the trees were like overhanging the gravel road. And there was this lady that was trying to hang herself from the tree. Like, she was trying to commit suicide, had a rope and everything. And I immediately stopped and I was like yelling at her, you cannot do this. You can't do this. And I was like yelling at all the things that I have been through. Like, I lost my daughter. I don't want to be here either. Like, it's so heavy, but you have to fight forward. You have to pull yourself out of it. You have to keep going. This is not the answer. And I was just like, it felt like it was hours in this dream that I was trying to talk to this lady. And I have thought so much about that dream. Like, why did I dream that? Like, I'm asking Hallie to show up in my dream. And here I have this like nightmare of this poor lady that it was like too much for her and she wanted out. And I think that's kind of led into, I have a lot of people tell me that like, I'm so strong. You're so strong to even talk about it. I don't see it that way. I do not feel like I am strong. I feel like I have stuff I want to share and it's in my head and I want to get it out. So I was thinking about like, how am I still here? Like, how am I able to talk about it? Like, what have I learned from grief? And maybe I should just share what those like summaries are and get it out of my head. So that's what the TikTok is. That's what the TikTok is. I came up with 3 things. When I really can sit in the stillness and go deep into that pain, I can then come up with the words to describe what grief has done to me. So I'll go into the first one.
Dive on in. Water's fine.
The first one is that you have to find that firm foundation to hold on to, because that unraveling stage when you go through traumatic loss or just major trauma in your life, you might be mourning and grieving who you used to be. Maybe something traumatic happened to you that you're still trying to heal from. It doesn't have to be that you lost someone close to you, but that unraveling stage will send you into a downhill spiral that it is extremely hard to pull yourself out of it. But you have to have some sort of lifeline. And to me, the only lifeline, especially in loss, is like faith in that higher power in God. Like, I don't know any other explanation for why I'm still here, except that I believe that I will see Hallie again. And I am holding on to that for dear life. So if you don't have that, then find it. Seek out the people that you know have it or that are getting through their traumatic experiences and go ask them for help.
That's one.
That's one.
I mean, I think that's what we say all the time is like, if we don't have that, then there's no, at that point, you'd just be in a spiral of, you could be a tree, right? You could die and just be a tree. Like, you're never going to see anybody again. And it also goes like, well, just live however I want to live at that point, because there's really nothing to live for. So I might as well live in a world where I have no regrets and I do all the crazy things that I want to do. Or do I have something I'm living for which is an opportunity to see Hallie again. But even like several months back, like Pastor Dave said, I think when we get there, it'll be, yes, we're excited to see Hallie, but what Jesus provides us in our life, in our Christian faith, is going to be so beautiful and magnificent that will overtake everything that we're longing for. And that's why we live the way we do. And we hope that one day we'll see Hallie again. So, I mean, I think you sharing that is 100% true. I don't know how people get through it when they don't have any kind of faith in something, right? Maybe listening, you're not a Christian, but you've got to have faith in something, or else I don't see how you're going to keep putting one foot in front of the other, because I see how hard it is for Angie to do that on a daily basis. And I know that the only way is because she's wanting to be with Hallie again.
The second thing, if I really dig deep and think about what I have learned from this, is that everything is temporary. Everything. There's not one thing in our lives that's permanent, except death really is the only guarantee. Like that's the only thing that you can 100% be sure of. So for me, I was holding on so tight to that I can't live without my kids. Like you try to imagine it, you can't imagine it. And so I would just say that if you feel like in your life there are things that you are holding so tight to that you think you can't live without, then it's worth the time to really dive deep into understanding the why of what you're holding on so tight to, and ensure that you can comprehend it being taken away. And I know that's all like really weird to say, but I think if you go back to number one and that you have this firm foundation in faith, then number two makes sense. And that it's like, I know that I am a steward of my kids. I'm not the owner of my kids. I need to have faith. I don't have to be fruitful, like just have faith. So that's number one, like I mentioned. But number two is knowing that everything is temporary. And it could be that it's a challenging situation that you're going through, and reminding yourself that it's temporary. It could be navigating extreme loss and know you have a lifetime of this ahead. Like for me, it's a life sentence. This isn't like a temporary thing that in the next couple of years, everything's going to be unicorns and rainbows and I'm going to be smiling again and it's going to be a freaking joyful life. I know I have moments of joy, but this is a lifelong sentence for me to live without my child.
I would just say to that, the sermon this past weekend kind of spoke to that a little bit, in that everything here is temporary, and preached on Luke, but one of the parables that Jesus taught also is in Matthew. And you talk about a master giving three different people three different monetary amounts, right? One gets 5, one gets 2, one gets 1. And then he leaves. And what do those people do? Well, the guy with 5 turns it into 10. The guy with 2 turns it into 4. The guy with 1, he buries it and does nothing with it. The moral of that is God saying to us, like, I'm giving all of you something, like your time, talent, your treasure. I'm giving all of you something. Sometimes you don't want what I'm giving you, like this scenario. But what are you doing with that? Because if I can trust you with the small things, this temporary life that you're living is going to pay off with magnificent reward with Jesus, with Hallie, with all our loved ones in the end, the moral of the story. And then that got me thinking of a verse that my buddy David wrote a song about years ago, Hebrews 12, chapter 1. And it says, therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely. Let us run with endurance the race that has been set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the ultimate. And so you think about that. This is the race that our family has been given to run, Angie more so than anyone. And it's not a race that any of us would choose to run. Yet how we run that race ultimately is how we'll be measured at the end of our lives, this temporary life.
And simply put, if you can touch it, it's not permanent.
Yeah,
So
that's
if,
fair.
If you struggle with that, like we probably all do, I know I did before I had this grief journey come charging towards me, then go back to number one, right? And I think the last hard lesson, but also valuable lesson that I've learned is when in doubt, zoom out. So this is such a long game that we're all playing. And, for me personally, I can get so wrapped up in the pain that I'm feeling right now that it consumes me. It's all I'm feeling. It's all I'm thinking about. And I can't focus on anything else. But if I zoom out and I can take a wider lens to look at the whole story, the whole journey, that although I know that this ache and this hurt will never go away, I can then, though, be grateful for what I have. I can be grateful that I was a mom to Hallie for 20 years. I can be grateful for the other kids that I have. I can be grateful for the memories and the adventures that we went on. Like, I can look at that and appreciate that in that moment, but only if I zoom out. I was talking to my mom and dad today, and I was kind of sharing these 3 lessons with them. I'm like, when I'm really struggling, I almost like close my eyes and I try to imagine what zooming way out would look like. Like if I was Hallie or God and you're like, galaxies away, like how tiny the earth would be, and then how tiny I would be on the earth. And then you try to think about the problems that I'm going through is so small in comparison to their view zoomed out. And so I try to, although that doesn't mean that it's not going to freaking hurt forever, like there's no putting the pieces back together, I can have a different perspective.
Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful way to put it, because, oftentimes when we're in this pain, we forget that Jesus suffered more than any of us, right? He suffered on the cross. He was completely betrayed by his friends, by his own father. And I forget that. And when we think about it and put ourselves in that zoomed out story, right, of what the actual bigger picture is, makes it a little bit easier to cope and to deal with. And I mean, you do a really good job. And I know that it's been a really hard week and you're struggling with many different things. I mean, if we were able to like deep dive, zoom out and see all the things you're having to deal with, people would be like, oh my gosh. I mean, they're already feeling bad for you. They'd be feeling even more bad for you. And so the bravery that you take on every day and that you do for, the kids, for the jobs that you work, for other mamas that are struggling. And, every day it's a new story about somebody that's lost a child, which I know is just like a gut punch every time because you relive it. At least I do. Every time I think about somebody losing a child, it's like go back to that day, and you're doing a good job. And I think it is a valuable 3 things that you've learned in grief that many people can't apply. And it is, you've said this, some days you got to crawl, like pull yourself out of bed to get into a day and to go through a day. And yet you do.
So hopefully if you're in a struggling season or someone that's going through hard times, share this with them. I know it's kind of overwhelming for me. Eric mentioned the TikTok that I posted, and it like immediately blew up, and it's just hundreds of moms saying that they lost a kid or they lost a husband. And there's so many like car accidents, boating accidents, and fentanyl overdoses that I've gotten so many responses of like, he was given fentanyl, she was given fentanyl, and it's just scary. And there's a lot of hurt out there. There's a lot of moms grieving, and yeah, my heart goes out to all of them because, man, I wouldn't wish this on anybody. Even my worst enemy, I would never wish this on them. So it's definitely, I do ask why often, wondering why. Like that's my first question when I see God is like, I hope it's really clear why did this happen and why did you pick me? And I'm not saying it in like a feeling sorry for myself. I just want to know why. And one day I'll get the answer and I'm sure it'll all be clear. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's why, maybe my message helps pick someone else up. I don't know.
I know God's given you many gifts, and unfortunately, when you utilize the gifts that he's given to you, this is part of that story. It's not the fun chapters of your story, the fun chapters of the gifts that you've been given, but it is your stewardship of those gifts to help other people. I say to people all the time, I think I've probably said on this podcast, is that When I met Angie, she was the kindest, happiest, most fun person I've ever been around. And now she's the kindest, saddest person that I've been around, but still the kindness, right? And so God's taken that kindness and you're using the kindness through your grief to help other people that are in the saddest places of their life is what I see. It doesn't mean I'm right. Doesn't mean that I know why God is making this the race for you to run, for our family, for any of it. But I do see that you use your kindness even in the darkest, hardest times.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have the answers either, but thanks. I definitely do try to stay kind. That's why we're all here. That's why we're all here. It's to bring love and light to other people. I do believe that.
Yeah. If you're on TikTok, you can watch the video on 3 things she's learned from grief. Halle Bear's Mom is her handle on TikTok. I don't know enough about social media to know. Can you post it on Instagram or no?
Yeah, I can.
She can. All right. So maybe we'll get it posted there too. See, trying to teach an old dog new tricks. But otherwise, that is all we have for you this week. Please say a prayer for us if you can. Just a hard season. And if you have any requests, reach out to us and we'll be praying for you as well. As always, we hope you have a wonderful week and God bless.
Thank you for listening to Blended Blessed and Always a Mess. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and at blendedblessedalwaysamess.com.
Reach out to us on any of our social channels. We would love to hear from you. Have a great week.